Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. I am so grateful for this opportunity to be with you. And if we haven't had the chance to meet yet, let me introduce myself. I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I have the most wonderful job. We can even call it a job. I get to inspire others. I offer one-on-one angel sessions, which take place over the phone, which provide you with an opportunity to deepen in your own divine guidance and connect with your angels. I also offer soul mentoring, which provides for ongoing support as you move through a passage of growth or change in your life. And then I offer a variety of classes. About every 6 weeks or so, I offer a new class. And often my classes are intimate in size, usually 8 people or less. So if you are looking for a loving, supportive, inspiring class where you will get to be seen and supported and loved, then I invite you to visit me at my website, illuminatingsouls.com, and I will keep you posted. I'm also active on my Facebook page, Illuminating Souls. So lots of ways that we can connect. And then there is this podcast, which exists because of 2 of my great loves of self-care, which is angels and sleep podcasts. So I have been listening to sleep podcasts for years, and I love them and have gotten so much value from listening to them that I've created this one for you. So if you've never used a sleep podcast before, the way it works, at least this one does, I'm sure all of them are a little bit different, is my intention is to be here for you for the next hour or so. I'm going to be speaking to you softly. I'm going to ramble a bit. I'm going to speak to you about things that are fairly benign and easy to process. So there'll be no loud sounds, no big surprises, and hopefully whatever we talk about will inspire you or maybe even interest you or keep you bored. Any of the above. But you're going to have an hour where I'll bring in the angels and we'll talk for a while. And I'm going to have story time where I share with you some snippets from my life, and I'm going to read to you for a little while. And my hope is this beautiful portal of light will provide you with a gentle invitation to drift off to sleep. I just find it so helpful to listen to a sleep podcast before I drift off. It helps me disconnect from whatever my mind was focused on when I was awake, to gently drifting off into that lovely no-thingness, as the Osho Zen Tarot calls it, into that great mystery of sleep. So if you are using this as a sleep podcast, my recommendation is that you get really cozy, snuggle on up in whatever way works for you. I like to turn the volume down low. I do listen with earbuds. They work for me when I'm sleeping. They don't bother me. But I turn the volume down low, lower than I would if I were listening to an audiobook, because I want to just slightly reach for the content. I don't want it blasting in my ears. I want it to be just enough that I have to reach. You know, when I grew up, our home was a 2-story house, and my sister and I shared a bedroom on the 2nd floor. And I have so many lovely, warm associations with the memories of drifting off to sleep while I heard activity downstairs, whether my parents were talking or watching the news or a television program. That gentle murmur in the background for me meant that someone I love is in the house with me. Like I'm safe, I'm cozy, and I can drift off. And I find that sleep podcasts evoke that similar comfort to me. I don't feel alone in the night. And not that I'm alone. I have my husband with me. I'm talking about more in my psyche, right? That feeling of companionship that is so sweet and lovely. So I hope to be this beautiful companion for you as you drift off. And also a nod of acknowledgement to all of you who listen during your waking hours, and your intention is to stay awake. So I know many of you use this as a companion as you commute to work or you go about your day. So however you are using this podcast, thank you so much for listening. And also, if I may ask, make a request, if you are enjoying it, if you would consider leaving a review or a rating, especially on iTunes, that would be awesome. I guess it would be Apple Podcast and not iTunes. I get them all confused. It's just a little icon on my phone that I press and it opens up. And voila, the vast world of podcasts is available to me. We live in such a cool world now, don't we? Like so much has changed. And we have these wondrous gadgets just available to us. And it brings us the world. So in this moment, I bring to you the wonderful world of angels and sleep and blessings and goodness. So as I record this episode, it is the early morning. That is my preference for recording because the world is still quiet. And somehow I have become a person who goes to sleep at 8 p.m. and I'm up at 4 a.m. Not because I set an alarm, but this is just what my circadian rhythm has adapted to. I have inherited my father, Jack's inner rhythm. My father would have a hard time keeping his eyes open past 8 o'clock at night, and he was always up in the wee hours of the morning. So I always think of him as I come into these mornings when the sun hasn't awakened the world yet. And it feels like it's perfect for a sleep podcast. So as I am here in the stillness of this moment, I share this beautiful stillness and quiet with you as well. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath in and out. That may seem like a strange invitation because we breathe all the time, otherwise we would not exist in 3D world. But there's something about that intentional breath in and out that invites us to center, that invites us to be present in this moment. And so if you are preparing for bed, just snuggle on in under the covers, fluffing your pillows just so. I sleep with lots of pillows and blankets, and so I burrow in to my cocoon. It is one of my favorite times of the day. I love my waking life, don't get me wrong. It is a wonderful life. But there is something about feeling my body growing so tired in the hour before I finally go to bed. And then I have the luxury of going to bed. My bed that is created just the way I like it. And then I pull the covers up, especially right now we're having chilly evenings. And it's toasty warm under the covers. And I just love that. It just feels so decadent. So I share my love of bedtime with you. And I feel the angelic love flowing in for you. So I'm going to call them in. They're already here, but as you know, I love the ritual of sharing them with you. I was just sharing yesterday in one of my classes how I love praying out loud at the beginning of a class or a session. Ever since I started doing this work, I have developed that as one of my rituals because I love it when someone else prays for me. I think prayer is such a potent way of sharing our love with each other. And so it is my absolute blessing to pray for you and with you right now. And this is a non-denominational prayer of calling in the angels. So let's just take a nice deep breath in together and we can call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here. I am so deeply grateful for the love you are streaming forward now for each of our beloveds who are receiving this message. And angels, I ask that you bring forward a lightness of spirit, helping each one of us remember who we are as divine beloveds of God. And angels, I ask that you help to lift and clear our worries and fears, helping to transform them into nothingness. Transform them into sparks of light that can be released back into the universe for the highest good of all concerned. And angels, I ask that you infuse us with waves of inspiration, miracles, serendipity, and happiness. So dear ones, just take some nice deep breaths in. And my prayer for you is that you know how precious you are in this world. That this world is better because you are here. That your life has this beautiful ripple across the timeline of your life. And this ripple is filled with blessings of love that you have bestowed into this world. And even though you may not be able to see this clearly, it is absolutely true. So take a deep breath in and release and receive the love the angels are streaming to you now. It always helps me to visualize this love as soft pink light. You can visualize it as a column of light or as a sphere of light that envelops you. And that this love, this light, it is a soft place for you to land. It cradles you gently. It knows your truth and it honors you. It honors everything that you are. It brings love to your physical body. It brings deep empathy to your emotional being. It brings soothing to the thoughts of your mind. And it helps you come into the center of all that you are. And so just breathe and be and allow this light to serve you. Sometimes when I am able to feel into this light, it feels expansive. It feels like a balloon almost that is subtly inflating. This beautiful light has a life force. It is life force because we are made of light. You know, I've shared this story with you before, but I don't expect you to remember it. But this concept of sending the light, I really first became intimately aware of it when I started attending the University of Santa Monica for spiritual psychology. And they would often say, send the light, which I really thought of as conceptual, right? Was this light even real? But it's a lovely thought. And so I always participated. I love this idea that we can send light to each other, that we can receive the light and something mysterious would happen. It's not necessarily that I had a direct visceral experience of it, but just the invitation that it existed brought me deep comfort. So flash forward several years later, I had graduated already and I was volunteering at the university one weekend a month as a reader, which meant that I helped verify the students' assignments. And when we would gather up in the reader circle, just before we would complete, we would send the light where it was needed. So if somebody was sick or had something going on, we would get together in the circle of readers, probably about 40 of us, and we would send the light. So one of the weekends, my dog was really sick. My dog Tessa, she had basically a year of doggy hospice where she wasn't quite ready to go, but she needed a lot of care. And it was one of the reading weekends. And so I called the university and said, I'm so sorry, I cannot come tonight. My dog is really sick and I need to stay home with her. But will you send the light? Because that's what we did. That was our vernacular. And so somewhere around 7 o'clock, a little bit before 7, I had completely forgotten about my light request, and Tessa was laying in her pile of blankets on the floor, resting, and I was curled up on the couch in my respective resting posture, and I'm watching television. And all of a sudden, I felt this wave of something show up, like this wave of light, right? But I didn't process it as such yet. Just this wave of something sparkling and delicious almost. And at that same exact moment, when I felt it, Tessa lifted her head up off the blankets and looked at me like, huh? Like, what was that? And it occurred to me. I was like, oh my God, Tessa, that was the light. They just sent us the light. And I looked at the clock, and sure enough, it was like 10 to 7, which was when they would have been completing the reader circle and sending the light just before class started. And I was so touched. I was deeply moved. And I thought, the light is real. Tessa and I both felt the light at the same time. And so in that moment, I think I had always believed in the power of the light. But in that moment, I had a visceral experience that said, this is real. So I share that with you because when I send you the light, I know it's real. Even if you don't sense it, there is this beautiful, organic essence of light that is the universe. And as creator beings, we can imbue this beautiful light with the intention of love and send it, and it gets amplified through the heart of our angels. Isn't that cool? And so, my beautiful friend, the angels and I send you light and love. And the light knows where it is needed. So it is helping to bring you healing and blessings. It is receiving your prayers and helping to amplify the intentions of your heart. So I invite you to rest now. You have done enough for this day. And you go ahead and drift off whenever you are ready. The angels will be with you. And while you rest, I'm going to read to you and tell you a story or two. So for this episode, I thought we would go into the Wayback Machine and I would share with you from a book called Behind the Screen by Samuel Goldwyn. I read from this book a little over a year ago, but I don't expect you to remember. But I have a pretty cool story that goes along with this book. Again, I've shared parts of it with you, but it's a really good story, so it's worth sharing again. So as some of you may know, I used to work for the Samuel Goldwyn Company. So I was thinking about this as I was contemplating reading from this book for this episode, and it kind of is really awe-inspiring to think of it this way. But I don't know that I would be who I am, living the life that I live, were it not for Samuel Goldwyn, the man who moved from somewhere in the Ashkenazi Jewish footprint of Eastern Europe back in the day and immigrated to the United States and started as one of the pioneers in the film industry. Had he not followed his dream, I might not exist in the form of Laurel that you know. This man directly impacted the course of my life. That's kind of crazy to think of, isn't it? That a man who died before I was born had a profound influence on the course of my life. So let me tell you how. So my whole life, I knew I wanted to work in television. That was very specific. And I could expand that to say I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. I wanted to live in Los Angeles. This was always my dream. So I went to school. I went to Columbia College and got a bachelor's degree in television broadcast. I got a job right out of school working for our local Fox TV station. This was before Fox was the Fox we know now. Back then, WFLD TV aired a lot of syndicated programming and things like that. And I was a broadcast materials manager, and it was my job to make sure that all of the materials for broadcast were in-house and prepared for airing. And that job required me to work with people at all of the different studios, Universal, Warner, Paramount, all of them, and the Samuel Goldwyn Company. So I'd taken a vacation in 1985, in March of 1985, to visit LA, and I met all of the different contacts at the different studios, including, I don't even know that I can remember his name. So my contact at the Samuel Goldwyn Company, once I had returned from my vacation, maybe about a month later, he said, "Hey, you want to move to Los Angeles, don't you?" I said, "I do." He says, "You know what? I just gave my notice. You should apply for my job." I was like, wow, okay, that's awesome. And this was in the day before we had faxes. So I put my resume and a cover letter together and I FedExed it to the Samuel Goldwyn Company. And this is one of those weird moments in my life where I know the stars aligned and the hand of God moved me to Los Angeles, because things happened that shouldn't have happened in the best way possible. They flew me out for an interview. This was for an entry-level position. And I promise you there were qualified people in Los Angeles who could have easily done the job. But they flew me out. And on the flight they were bringing me out, coach was full, and so they put me in first class. So I was flown first class from Chicago to Los Angeles for a job interview for an entry-level position. They put me up in a hotel. They rented me a car. I got the job. They also gave me a moving allowance. None of this should have happened, but it did. So I was relocated to Los Angeles by the Samuel Goldwyn Company, which was the company Samuel Goldwyn Sr.'s son had established. So I worked for Samuel Goldwyn Jr.'s company. But that company existed because of Samuel Sr.'s legacy. They had a wide catalog of old movies that Samuel Sr. had produced that were then being repackaged for television syndication. And Samuel Goldwyn Jr. also was a movie producer. He also produced the Oscars for several years in a row, and I got to go to the rehearsals for the Oscars my first few years living in Los Angeles. It was also at the Samuel Goldwyn Company that I became deeply unhappy with my life's path and decided to go back and get an MBA from Pepperdine so I could make more money. I wanted to make $30,000 a year, which sounded like a huge salary back then. And I'm sure in some places in the world or in this country, it's still a huge salary. Back then, it would be like saying, I want to earn 6 figures a year kind of thing. And it was in my first class in human development that I had my first ever psychic experience, because the teacher taught the class from the perspective of law of attraction and all of these metaphysical concepts that we now talk about in this podcast. And after I had my first ever psychic experience, I went back to work the next day, and my friend Judy was my coworker. And I said to her, "Judes, I think I'm psychic." And she laughed, and she realized that's why she had gone to work there, was so she could be there in that moment for me. So all of these key creation lines of my life came together because Samuel Goldwyn Sr. lived the life that he did. Isn't that crazy? That this man who I never met is deeply responsible in the best way possible for the trajectory of my life, that I don't know who I would be had that not happened. Right? I don't know that I would have ever moved to Los Angeles. I don't know that I would have ever met my friend Jude's or my other friends that I had at that time. I had amazing friends who I met because I moved to Los Angeles, having a psychic experience because I decided to get an MBA because I was deeply unhappy because of Goldwyn. I mean, all of it. It's one of those pinnacle moments of my life when my path profoundly shifted because of this man's legacy. So thank you. Thank you, Sam Goldwyn, for being you. You have no idea how our ripples have converged, and if you have gained any kind of benefit or comfort from the work that I do, your inspiration is also associated now with Samuel Goldwyn's. Like when you think about how the tapestry of the universe is woven together, it is simply beyond comprehension, right? So this man who decided to move and immigrate to the US and get involved in the film industry somehow created this portal of opportunity for me to go to LA and become the Laurel that I am now. And all the other points of light that converged there as well, right? But right now, we can directly trace the moment that you and I are having to the influence of this man. I mean, maybe I would have found my way to a podcast, who knows, but I would not be who I am now had I not traveled that path, that portal that opened up for me in 1985. My life would be a different life now. So, how is that for some cool cosmic reflection as we dive into this book? See, now you feel perhaps that you have an intimate connection with this man. So here we go. And this book was published in 1923, and he shares a lot of stories about different actors at the time and different movie productions of the time. So how would it be if I skip ahead and read to you about Charlie Chaplin? Perhaps you've seen the movie with Robert Downey Jr., or you've seen Charlie Chaplin's movies. I studied film in school, so studying his movies was a part of my coming of age in the entertainment industry. So I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 13, titled The Real Chaplin. Although I had heard much of Charlie Chaplin from various friends, We shared in common. I did not meet him until after I had been in the industry for 2 years. That first sight of him surprised me as much as it always does those who know the familiar comedian of the black mustache and baggy trousers. A slender fellow, smooth-shaven, waves of crisp black hair and dark blue eyes that have that peculiar smoky quality of the autumn hills. Here's the catalogue of his outward self. But of course you cannot compress into a catalogue the charm of his face. There's a charm there, even beauty. In this connection, indeed, I remember Chaplin's telling me laughingly that his mother once protested indignantly at his makeup. "Why do you want to make yourself look hideous?" said she, "you who are so beautiful." But although his contours are satisfactory and his eyes exceedingly handsome, the real interest of Chaplin's face lies in its perpetual and sensitive absorptions. He seems always listening. Even when he is talking most animatedly, he is watching you, wondering about you, quite evidently trying to fit you and your words into some pattern. When you yourself are talking, you get the full force of this vivid listening. Max Sennett has often spoken about this characteristic message of his face as it was revealed to him during Chaplin's first studio stays. He'd sit there for hours, records Mac, just staring at people. I couldn't make out what he was thinking about. Since that first meeting of ours, acquaintance has developed into a friendship which I certainly count one of the privileges of my life. From that friendship, it is hard to detach myself for an objective survey of the gifted pantomimist. Even had I not been so close to him, I should find formidable the task of analysis. For Chaplin is a maze of contradictions, and no sooner have you affixed to him any one attribute than lo, the next moment has swept it away. Chaplin loves power, as no one else whom I have ever met, he loves it. Money contributes to this sense. Therefore he sticks out for his great large contract, and therefore he saves a great deal of his earnings. But it affords him just as much consciousness of power to think that he, Chaplin, can afford to walk away from those assembled actors and stagehands. Ergo, he does that. I have often been asked if Chaplin is amusing when away from the screen. He is thoroughly so. His mimicry is delightful. His dancing is perhaps even more so. To see Chaplin improvising a London street scene with William DeMille, to hear him deliver the speech of a Jewish manufacturer at a banquet where he had been presented with a loving cup, to watch his imitations of some fashionable rhythmic dancer. At one of these last performances, he carried a cuspidor as a Greek vase and concluded by deftly catching it in the crook of his knee. Such are the memories of Charlie treasured by those who know him. I always like to think of the day when he got back from Europe. He came straight to my office to see me, and I never heard anything so infectious as those descriptions of his triumphal tour. When he came to the story of his decoration with the Legion of Honor, he reached a high peak in that imitative narrative of which he is such a perfect master. Yet here again you are faced by another of those contracts which bewilder the biographer. There are certain days when instead of drollery and pungent narrative, he presents a well of unfathomable silence. On such days he runs away from his studio and from everybody. For hours he will sit motionless in his room, or perhaps staring off alone. He will wander into an orange grove or tramp through the hills around Hollywood. He suffers at such times undoubtedly, but make no mistake, the blackness of the universe, the torturing puzzle of existence, which sometimes engulfs so many of us, are never repudiated by Chaplin. He does not desire madly to lose himself in somebody or something apart from his own life. He would not in his most tortured moment shift places with the merriest. No, for the blackness is his blackness, and what he wants is experience, no matter whether that be happiness or pain. This hunger for a high measure of sensation is found in his horror of old age. With a kind of fierce rebellion, he looks into a neighboring glass at the streaks of gray in his hair. Ugh, he will shiver, to think the time is coming when I shan't be young any more. His reaction to life is, you see, intensely personal, intensely emotional. Nothing is more persuasive of this than his interest in certain impersonal topics. Chaplin loves to talk about government and economics and religion. Mention of a new ism brings him loping from the farthest corner of the room. When Rupert Hughes came out to Hollywood, he and Charlie were much given to what somebody calls topics, just topics. Nothing could have been more illuminating. While Hughes conducted his side of the discussion in a spirit of dispassionate inquiry, the less scientifically trained mind of the comedian struck out with a poet's frenzy at everything which he did not like. One could see it was not really abstract truth which he desired. It was the theory which most successfully represented his own prejudice. His prejudice is against anything which interferes with his own personal freedom, the censor, the income tax, any supposed obstruction. These are hateful to him in the degree to which they infringe upon that coveted sense of power. One day, when I first came to know Chaplin well, he was with me in my apartment at a Hollywood hotel. While we were talking, the telephone rang and Charlie looked terrified. "What do they want you for?" I asked, exceedingly amused. "A guest," he answered with a grin. "Mrs. X asked me for dinner tonight. I promised I'd be there and then found out she had asked a whole lot of people, so you won't catch me going." This was my introduction to Charlie's most notorious social failing. Often thereafter, I witnessed his struggles against being taken into custody. Less frequently, I was one of a group of indignant people waiting for Chaplin who had promised to come and never did show up at all. Not long ago, a friend of mine asked him why he so hated to make or keep an engagement. "I don't know," answered Charlie. "I suppose, though, it's because I hate to feel that I have to do anything at a certain time. It just destroys my pleasure in doing it." At this, my friend suggested, "Ah, Mr. Chaplin, but don't you think that it is because way down deep you don't feel quite free? The person who is conscious of real freedom doesn't fret at any such superficial bondage." He looked at her eagerly, delightedly, just as he always does when confronted by a new theory. "Why, I never thought of that, but I believe it's true," he assented. "You see," he added, "when I was a young boy, I was never free. I was always the one who had to stay at home. My brother Sidney didn't hang around as I did. He went off to Australia." Then, for the first time, I suspected what was responsible for Charlie's love of power. Those early years of his in London, when the son of poor vaudeville artists, he experienced hunger and tragedy and the constant terror of the next day, have driven far into his brain. No prosperity can quite rid him of fear. That is why he wants to assure himself in every way of his present strength. For what is it but fear which makes a man conscious always of the thickness of his armor and the sharpness of his weapons? There was one engagement of his which Charlie did keep. When Claire Sheridan, the English sculptress, came to California, She expressed immediately a desire to meet Chaplin. My friend Abram Lair thereupon invited the comedian to a dinner given for the handsome author of From Mayfair to Moscow. "And don't you dare fail me this time," admonished Mr. Lair, as he preferred the invitation. Charlie not only obeyed, he obeyed in a dinner coat. From the first, so Lair reports, the two seemed entirely satisfied with each other, and that occasion led to the friendship upon which Mrs. Sheridan dwells so glowingly in her American Diary. Charlie is well liked by the average woman. Indeed, most people are attracted to him. Why should they not be? His drollery, his quick and vivid response to the moment, his friendly boyish smile, the manner which makes you feel at first meeting as if you had known him all your life. These would lead the usual person to pick him out in a room of distinguished people. And all this quite apart from the glamour of his reputation. He makes another appeal. The first time I ever met him, I felt sorry for him. The humor of it, that I should want to help him, this young, charming Fortunatus, does that sound right? Fortunatus. Okay, we'll go with that. Struck me almost at once, but I could not help it. Afterwards, I found that nearly everyone else shares this feeling. Of course, exactly the same thing is operative on the screen. For Chaplin owes his supremacy as much to the tears as to the laughter of the multitude. This pathos of his comes from an enduring isolation. He is, and I think always will be, a lonely figure. Beloved by many, applauded by all, he is merely with, never of, the crowd. Not though he gives it back gesture for gesture and laugh for laugh. Not misleading, the look of listening which so much impressed me the first time I met him. For early in life, Chaplin took his seat in the parquet of life, and ever since he has been watching the rest of us, actors, unfolding our drama. Do not be deceived, because sometimes he vaults over the footlights and behaves just like the performers, even when he is at his merriest pranks, even when he is talking most confidently and affectionately to his friends. He is still the onlooker, detached from the rest of us by I know not what fastness of spirit. The most intimate of Charlie's friends in Hollywood are Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. He goes over to their house frequently, and the three talk pictures hard and fast. Chaplin, of course, frequently sees in the creations of the other two an opportunity for characteristic suggestions. When, for instance, he saw the moated castle in Robin Hood, he said to Fairbanks, "Wonderful, Doug. Just think what I would do in that drawbridge on a Sunday morning. I'd let it down so I could take in the Sunday papers and the milk bottles, and then draw it up tight so that nobody could get to me all the rest of the day." One time I asked Charlie who his favorite screen actress was. "I think Mary Pickford," he answered unhesitatingly. "You see, there is a wonderful quality about her. It's more than her acting. Unlike almost every other screen actor, Charlie does not work from a script. When he starts a new story, he is apt to come into a studio and say, 'Build me a kitchen and a dining room.' He has at this moment perhaps only the germ of an idea, but day by day he develops it, and as he does so, his scenario writer puts down each scene. This method has often been described, and I touch upon it here only for its value in revealing his psychology. A scenario would undoubtedly irk him as much as would a social engagement. Always, always, Chaplin must be assured that he is free, that his individuality has scope for its spontaneous play. His emotionality is never more apparent than when he is at work. Often he becomes exhausted in his efforts to inspire one of his company with the desired emotions. Heavens, he will cry, it's enough to break your heart, such stupidity. When he sees the rushes, angers and despair are apt to break from their leashes and run away with the projection room. Often, however, these emotions are directed quite as much towards his own part in the performance as towards that of the others. Charlie has, in fact, that capacity for being dissatisfied with his own work, which is a part of every great artist. The world at large does not seem to know much about Charlie's brother Sidney, yet he is a very real brother, and Charlie has very real affection for him. He himself is an excellent comedian with only one disadvantage. He is the near relative of a great comedian. This relationship, I may add, could never be detected from a casual glance at the two, for Sid Chaplin is rather tall and rather blond, and his features are much more sharply cut than those of his brother. Sid, by the way, possesses a very ready wit. Once when dining with Mary and Doug, he listened to the latter's statement that the costumes for Robin Hood had cost $162,000. Is that right? Wow. Okay, so the costumes for Robin Hood had cost $162,000 in the 1920s. That was a tremendous amount of money. Commented Sid. I should call that Robin Doug. Robbin. It was after completing his $670,000 contract with the Mutual Film Company that Charlie made with the First National Company a $1 million deal calling for 8 two-reel pictures. This did not sound difficult. The comedian expected to complete the order in a year. Instead, he has only just recently finished the last of the National Film pictures. All right, and that brings us to the end of this chapter and recollections of Charlie Chaplin. So I hope you enjoyed this voyage into old Hollywood. Also a little bit about my own journey and the way we are connected with people we may never have met before. So, thank you so much for allowing me the blessing of spending this time with you. I am deeply grateful for you. You rest well, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you, and sweet dreams to you.